Okay, what's up, everybody? Okay, so we went from the Garden of Eden to Atlantis. From Atlantis, we went to Egypt and Israel civilizations. From Egypt and Israel civilizations, we went to Carthage from the Phoenician civilizations. And then from Carthage, we are now going to go to the Moors civilization, which ties in to all these previous civilizations. The Moors ties into the Israelites, the Phoenicians, and the Egyptians. And when I think about the Israelites, the Egyptians, and Carthage, Rome was behind the actual fall of all three of those great civilizations. So, and also the Gauls. So Rome basically spearheaded the fall of these remnants of the Atlantic civilizations. Rome conquered these offshoots of Atlantis, starting with the Punic Wars. Rome, Scipio Africanus of Rome against Hannibal of Carthage. The Punic Wars, one of the greatest wars of the ancient world, of the old world Mediterranean civilizations. Many generals study the Punic Wars. Is a great war between the maritime trade civilization of the Phoenicians against this rising imperialistic heavy infantry nation of the Romans. So, but ultimately, history shows us that Rome defeated Carthage. Then you fast forward to Rome. Now Rome is a much bigger empire. They've conquered the Gauls. They've conquered Carthage. They've conquered most of the world now, the Mediterranean. So now they focus on Egypt. You know, how could they be this great civilization and not conquer Egypt? So now you have Cleopatra the seventh against Rome. Cleopatra the seventh of the Ptolemy dynasty, the Ptolemaic dynasty. The Ptolemy dynasty comes from Alexander the Great when he had his empire. After Alexander died, his empire collapsed and fractured into the Diadochi, which is Ptolemy, one of his great generals, top generals, had took over his Egyptian parts of the empire. He took over Egypt. So Cleopatra was from the same lineage of these Greek Ptolemies. So we do have to understand that Cleopatra most likely was mixed with the Greek, but also her mother was Egyptian, native Egyptian. And Cleopatra I believe she knew like 7 languages, including obviously Greek and Egyptian. So Cleopatra was mixed, but at the same time, she was of the Ptolemy dynasty, which was a puppet. They were puppet leaders over the native population. Just like Pontius Pilate of Rome was a puppet governor over the Judean provinces. Okay, so ultimately, Cleopatra, she tried to win over the Romans' hearts by sleeping with them, laying with Caesar and I forgot Antony. But Alexander, her brother, was against that. She's like, Cleopatra, don't mess with them. Don't do that. Because before that point, really, our women were not supposed to, in our culture, we're not supposed to sleep with other races. That's a very modern concept, is a black woman just out here throwing herself at at all cultures, all men. That's a very modern concept. Before, our women were very sacred, okay? But regardless, okay, so the Roman Empire is growing, they're really peaking at their height, and they ultimately defeat the Egyptians against Cleopatra, okay? Now, so out of Carthage, Egypt, and Israel, you still had these Israelites left over. So now the Roman Empire is at its height. They took over the whole Mediterranean, they took over Egypt, but you still have these slaves in your empire. You know, you don't just conquer the whole land and kill everybody. You still have the slaves left over, which is how you get the story of Jesus and the Jews in the Judean province under Pontius Pilate, which is under the whole Roman Empire. And okay, so Jesus dies. The third temple is brought down. And also, okay, so Jesus died, but then years later, you fast forward a bit, 70 AD, the siege of Jerusalem, that was the fall of Jerusalem. So maybe Jesus was the spiritual fall of Jerusalem, but when they really fell was in 70 AD, when Rome said, okay, we're just taking them out now. Okay. So now that Israel was the last surviving of the ancient Black Atlantean civilization remnants, that, you know, they were the last survivors, the last man standing in a sense, before the Moors. Okay. So now after the Romans took over in 70 AD, defeated the Israelites in Jerusalem, now they pretty much have full reign over the Mediterranean, and now they are considered the top civilization. Okay. Even today, Americans, we study Roman civilization. We look up to them as one of the top civilizations. Okay. So that's just painting a picture of how these ancient Black civilizations fell to Rome. So the Punic Wars, the wars against Cleopatra, and then we all know the biblical story of the Israelites, their captivities, and we know what happened to Jesus. And then in 70 AD, ultimately they were wiped out. Okay? So that leads us into the Moors now, and the lost tribes of Israel, because now that your homeland is destroyed, Rome has conquered all. Where are all these Phoenicians going without no homeland? Where are all these Carthaginians going? Where are all these Egyptians going? Where did all these Israelites go? Okay. A lot of them fell in Africa, and they still remained in Africa, which is how you get the Garamantians and the Moors, which also led to the Moors, okay? So you fast forward, now the Moors are rising. After Roman collapse, the fall of Romans, the barbarians rise again. Now the Atlanteans that they beat are gaining their power again, just through the nature of, you know, kings and generals, just the nature of history. This is some biblical stuff going on, okay? So now the Moors finally regain power. Now the Moors have conquered North Africa and Spain. Okay, so these Moors, their culture and religion was very tied with the Muslims. By now you have a lot of Muslims, which is a mixed race in a sense, in Egypt and Jerusalem. So now they are Muslims. Some of us know the story of Muhammad, at least a little bit. So these Muslims have dominated a lot of Africa, okay, and imposed their culture and religion on those Africans. But many of those Africans that were forced to convert to Islam, were actually Christians from the days of Jesus. Their descendants. They were Israelites, okay, and they were, of course, descendants of the Carthaginians and Phoenicians. Okay, so this is tying all of that ancient Black history into the Moors and how did they end up becoming Muslims. Okay, so now you have this Muslim empire which takes over North Africa and Spain. And that territory looks almost identical to the territory of ancient Carthage civilization, which was North Africa, Spain, okay, Cordoba, okay. So now we have these Black leaders. That's where you get Timbuktu. That's where you get Mali, Mansa Musa, the wealthiest man in the history of the world with the most gold ever, Mansa Musa. So now that you have this Moorish culture, the Moors were also responsible for civilizing Europe. So after Rome fell, they really went into a dark age. And when the Moors took back over, now they have civilized Europe. And from what we hear is that the Moors really civilized Europe in as much as a positive way as you can. Here's some soap, here's some baths, here's some colleges, here's civilization. It wasn't necessarily about imposing their will, imposing their religion on them. They allowed people to have free religion. Okay, so the Moors were really the peak of Black civilization before slavery happened. When you look up Christopher Columbus, when he came to America, the Americas, he came with, the driver of this ship was Pedro Alonso Nino of the Nino brothers of Spain, okay? Portugal. The Nino brothers were Black. Pedro Alonso Nino was a Black man, a Moor, okay? You look up George Washington, he has pictures with Moors. Freemasonry comes from Moor science. Moors are they picked up all of that Israelite knowledge, Egyptian knowledge, all into one civilization, okay? The Moors are the descendants of these great empires. The Treaty of Morocco, America's first treaty, the treaty that recognized America as a country, is the Treaty of Morocco of Peace and Friendship of 1777, I believe. Okay, so the first treaty is signed with Morocco, the king of Morocco of these Moors. Okay, so the Moors have a lot to do with that ancient Carthage and modern maritime law of sea trade. Okay, these are the Moors. And then you also, with the Reconquista, okay, that is when those Europeans of Spain united, okay, to get their territory back from those Moors. Okay, that's when you get the Reconquista, the Christians against those Moors. And that's when you start to see the decline of the Black civilization again, which led to our enslavement. But before that, we were the scholars, we were the scientists, we were the mathematicians, we were the builders. We were the ones who built the colleges, the ones who knew the farmings, the ones who knew how to get to America, the ones who were already trading with the Americans and the Aztecs for hundreds of years, which is why you have a lot of Native Americans and Africans were already trading and commingling cultures. Okay? A lot of these Moorish science temples will teach that we were one empire, America and Africa. Okay? So the Moors are very, very big when it comes to history. And they are not taught a lot in our history books in America. For some reason, they're not taught, speaked on a lot. And when they are speaked on, they're just referred to as Muslims. And you assume that they're these light-skinned Muslims. But really, a lot of them were these dark Muslims. Think of even one of the more prominent Moors, Othello the Moor. He was this black man, I believe, in Spain. And this was more towards Othello the Moor. His story was more towards the decline of that Moorish empire, the Reconquista. Okay, but Othello, his story was about this black man, this black nobleman, soldier, okay, warrior that was left. He was one of just the last man standing as well, But it just tells about his story of being a black nobleman surrounded by white people, basically, in his declining empire. So a lot of black people should look up Othello the Moor, and his story is very important. And just the Moorish history is very big. So, there's a big difference between Moors and these savages and huts that they try to portray you as. How were we Moors in 1777? But in these propaganda books, you just have sticks and huts. Okay, somebody's lying here. Some history is getting covered up. When you look at Moorish law in America, you understand that these police don't have jurisdiction over you. A lot of these men in prison shouldn't be in prison. They're being held captive illegally, according to Moorish law. But you over here thinking that you're black. What is black? See, when they take you away from your Cherokee, when they take you away from Algonquian, from Cahokian, from Moorish, when they take you away and throw terms at you like Negro and black, now you're just black. Now you what I tell you is, now you what I tell you, you are what I tell you you are now, black man and black woman. You're black. You're black. You're a color. You're black. Your identity is stripped of you. Now I can impose any law I want on you because you're under my jurisdiction. This is why I say history is very important, because y'all running around thinking you black, which is fine. I still refer to myself as black, okay? But I know my Moorish history. I know my Egyptian history. I know my Israelite history. I know my Carthaginian history. Turn back these pages of history before slavery. So the true Freemasons are Moors. The Moors are the descendants of the Egyptians, the Israelites, and the Phoenicians, and every other great African civilization. So who are you, black man and black woman? Who are you? Why are they trying to destroy you, and what are they hiding from you?